The ballroom pulsed with soft jazz and candlelight. White roses draped every table. Champagne glasses clinked like crystal lies. And I stood there still silent, shaking, clutching the truth in my hand. My sister's wedding dress shimmered under the chandeliers. Vanessa twirled all satin and spotlight, a vision of curated perfection. George beamed beside her, holding the mic. "To our true daughter," he said, voice thick with pride. My champagne flute trembled. True daughter. The words burned more than the cheap bubbles sliding down my throat. I looked at my fingers' nails, perfectly painted knuckles white from gripping the envelope. The DNA results weighed less than an ounce, but heavier than 20 years of silence. Across the room, Linda sipped from her etched glass lips, pursed in satisfaction. She never liked me wearing red. Tonight I wore crimson. I thought of all the nights I wired money when their accounts were empty. All the times I watched Vanessa unwrap gifts while my birthday passed with a maybe next week. All the whispered rumors, the pointed remarks. "You're not really like us, Natalie. Different blood, maybe." And now this. Their final act, a wedding toast to erase me completely, to seal the story that I never belonged. But they were wrong. They had always been wrong. I unfolded the paper, hands trembling just slightly. My eyes skimmed the names, the percentages, the match. George Evans' paternal relationship confirmed. 99.998%. The music swelled behind me. A waiter passed by with a tray of gold-dusted cake slices. Someone laughed near the stage. I stepped forward. The marble floor felt colder than it should. Each step echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. I didn't need to shout. I simply raised the paper. "My name was never the mistake," I said. "Just the one you tried to erase." Linda dropped her glass. It shattered at her feet like the fantasy they built, and I turned heels clicking, heart racing, mouth dry, but my spine straight. I didn't stay to watch the ruin. I had said what needed saying. And that night, I stopped begging to be part of something that never saw me. Would you fight back or walk away with your dignity? Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to prove your worth? Subscribe for more real stories about justice, closure, and empowerment after 40. Our house in Tacoma always smelled like lemon polish and silent expectations. Not love, not comfort, just the sterile sharpness of cleanliness and the quiet pressure to stay polished myself. Vanessa's piano sat under the bay window, always dust-free, always in tune. She played Mozart with delicate wrist and perfect posture, and the neighbors clapped like she was auditioning for something bigger. No one noticed I had taught myself algebra 2 years early. Sunday afternoons blurred together, teacups, linen napkins, smiles that weren't for me. "Vanessa, that was lovely," they'd say. "Natalie, be a dear and refresh the lemon water." I did, of course I did. Mom's voice lived in that house like a second chandelier, cold, decorative, unyielding. "She's our little star," she'd beam, squeezing Vanessa's hand. "Natalie, you've always been practical. Now help me with the silverware." My trophies stayed in drawers. Scholarships, mathletes, national rankings. "No space on the mantle," she said. "Too much clutter." I once pinned a medal to the wall near the stairs. It disappeared within days. In its place, a watercolor painting Vanessa made in summer camp. 3 crooked daisies in a cracked plastic frame. I knew then some daughters got displayed, others got erased. Dad noticed none of it, or pretended not to. He sat quietly reading business reports, or pretending to care about roast chicken. He laughed loudest at Vanessa's jokes. Never asked me how my part-time job was going. When I turned 17, I found out my college fund was gone. They used it for Vanessa's tuition to an art school in Portland. Mom told me casually over toast. "You're strong, Natalie. You've always figured things out." I didn't cry. I washed my plate, put on my apron, and left for the diner. Grease clung to everything in that place. My fingertips smelled like French fries for months. But the pay was decent, and I got free coffee refills during my break. Sometimes I studied between orders, econ textbooks open beside ketchup bottles. The cook called me college girl with a wink. No one from home ever came in. I told myself that was a good thing. Still, every night I came back to that lemon-scrubbed house, to Vanessa's laughter through thin walls, to dinners where I served and she performed. And even then, part of me clung to hope that one day someone would finally see what I had carried alone. When Dad's business failed in 2019, the house got quieter, but only when it came to me. They still hosted garden brunches. Vanessa still wore silk dresses and carried conversations like pearls in her teeth. But when the mortgage payment slipped, it was my phone that rang at midnight. Nat, sweetie Dad's voice cracked. Could you help us this month, just until things settle? I helped, again and again. 10,000 here, 8,000 there. I transferred from my savings account with trembling hands staring at the screen in my dark apartment. I stopped buying fresh flowers for myself, canceled therapy, ate cereal for dinner 3 nights a week. They never asked how I was managing, only if the money had gone through. Mom sent me one thank you card. It was blank inside except for her name in perfect cursive. I kept it in a drawer, not out of sentiment, just proof. Meanwhile, Vanessa posted photos of Italy, sun-drenched vineyards, champagne flutes in hand. Her caption read, "Wander often, worry never." I stared at the screen, hunger twisting in my stomach, not for food, but for something I didn't know how to name. When I asked Mom why Vanessa wasn't helping financially, she waved her hand like I'd said something crude. Vanessa is sensitive. Stress would ruin her creativity. I wanted to scream. Instead, I lowered my voice and asked about the inheritance. Her tone turned icy. We're not discussing that. Let's just say, some things are best kept in the family. And just like that, I became the outsider again. The helper, the reliable one, never the daughter they toasted at dinner. Sometimes I wondered if they actually loved me, or if I had simply become convenient. I'd fall asleep staring at my ceiling fan, its blades slicing the dark in slow, tired circles. Even in my dreams, I was serving tea. The group chat was renamed Family Wins. I wasn't added. I found out through a screenshot. Vanessa posted a photo of a new necklace with Dad's caption, "Because our girl deserves the world." Our girl. I stared at the message for 10 full minutes. There was no mistake. They meant her. They bought her a car that year, a white Lexus with a ribbon the size of my dignity. I found out when she pulled up to brunch, laughing, engine purring. When I arrived late from a meeting, Mom asked why I looked tired. "You should take better care of yourself," she said, handing me a tray of quiches. "Maybe if you smiled more." I wanted to leave. I wanted to scream, but I stayed, because that's what daughters do, at least the kind they don't celebrate. That night, I opened my laptop and reviewed my bank transactions. There were over 30 separate payments to their accounts over 4 years. Rent, repairs, medical bills, a retreat in Sedona. My name was in none of the thank you notes, because there were none. I didn't want their applause. I wanted recognition, to be seen, to be someone who mattered even when I wasn't saving them. I remember once when I was 15, Vanessa had borrowed my favorite sweater. She returned it stained with cherry lip gloss. Mom shrugged and said, "Well, she wears it better anyway." That's when I learned. Not all erasure is loud. Sometimes it whispers softly as it removes you from the center of your own life. In early 2022, I made a list. Not resolutions, just facts. 1. I paid more into their lives than they ever did into mine. 2. They gave Vanessa everything I was told to earn. 3. I was tired, bone tired. And then I heard a whisper again, not theirs, mine. "You deserve to know. You deserve to be sure." So I ordered the test. Alone at 2 a.m. under the kitchen light, while the dishwasher hummed behind me, I swabbed the inside of my cheek with shaking hands. Not out of fear, but because part of me hoped they were right. That I didn't belong to them. Because then maybe the hurt would finally make sense. The test results sat unopened for 3 days. Each time I reached for the envelope, my fingers froze. What if it confirmed everything they whispered? What if I wasn't one of them? I stared at the ceiling above my bed, shadows shifting with passing headlights. 1,000 memories blurred behind my eyes. Vanessa's birthday cakes, their anniversary trips, family photos, without me. Once I asked Dad why I wasn't in the photo wall by the stairs. He said, "Oh, we just ran out of frames." His smile was gentle, but I never saw a new frame appear. I tried to shake the feeling, tried to believe I was just being sensitive, dramatic, maybe even ungrateful. But the whispers never stopped. At Vanessa's engagement brunch, I walked into the kitchen to grab water. That's when I heard it. "She doesn't even look like George," Aunt Marcy said, her voice too casual. "She's probably from before Linda and him were serious." My chest went hollow. I didn't walk in. I turned around, glass, still empty, hands suddenly cold. That night I scrolled through photos on my phone. My nose, my chin, my hair, none of it matched theirs. Vanessa's features mirrored Linda's. Mine looked borrowed. The next morning I opened the test results. Not to silence them, but to silence something inside me. But the truth would come later. First came the doubt. The kind that makes you reread every email, replay every cold glance, redraw every memory, wondering what you missed. When I sent Mom a text that week, just a photo of an old science fair ribbon I'd found in a drawer, she replied, "Vanessa's wedding rehearsal starts at 4. Please don't be late." No smiley face, no acknowledgement, just a command. I sat in my office, the city skyline dull behind the window, and realized something I never dared say aloud. They didn't want me there. They never really did. At the rehearsal dinner, I sat at the far end of the table. Next to a cousin I barely knew, Vanessa was seated between our parents, glowing in candlelight, her hand resting lightly on Dad's arm. He didn't flinch, just smiled, leaned in, whispered something that made her laugh. No one noticed I hadn't been served a drink. No one asked how my week had been. I was just there. A placeholder, a polite obligation. When the toast began, Mom stood first. She raised her glass, her voice clear and proud. "To my beautiful daughter, the light of our lives," and to Mike for recognizing her worth. Her eyes never even brushed past mine. I looked down at my plate, half-wilted salad, untouched chicken, a dinner as cold as the silence surrounding me. They moved on to gifts. Vanessa unwrapped a pearl bracelet from Dad. He said it had belonged to Grandma Rose, saved just for this moment. I didn't get anything, not even a card, not even a glance that said, "You matter too." After dinner, I slipped out early. No one followed. No one asked where I went. Outside, the Seattle air was sharp with mist. I stood under the soft buzz of a street lamp, clutching my coat tighter, watching guests file out in pairs, laughing. A woman in her 40s walked by with her teenage daughter. Their laughter was real, soft, effortless, not a performance. I watched them disappear into the parking garage, and suddenly I wasn't sad. I was angry. I had given so much, and yet I was nothing more than a backdrop in their curated family photo. That night, back in my apartment, I pulled out the test results again, read them slowly, every line, every number. The facts were indisputable. Paternal match, George Evans, probability 99.998%. I was not some accident, not some mistake they had to tolerate. I was their daughter, their full daughter. And yet, they built a life pretending I wasn't. I wanted to confront them, to march into that house, wave the results, demand they say it to my face. But I didn't, because deep down, I already knew what they'd do. Smile, deny, twist it, turn the spotlight back to Vanessa, make me feel dramatic, ungrateful, small. So I stayed quiet, for now, but something inside me had shifted. I stopped replying to Mom's check-in texts. There were only 2 that month, both about Vanessa's bachelorette itinerary. When I didn't show up to the wine tasting, no one called. When I skipped the bridesmaid dress fitting, no one noticed. The irony, I was still footing part of the florist bill. They'd sent the invoice to my work email by mistake. I paid it, then forwarded the receipt to Clara, my mentor and old professor. The subject line read, "How much longer should I pay to be invisible?" She called within minutes. Her voice was warm, steady, like a hand reaching through fog. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're not cold. You're just done being erased." I didn't cry, but my throat ached like I had swallowed years of apology. We spoke for 2 hours, mostly about nothing, mostly about everything. At the end, she asked, "If you were your own daughter, what would you want her to do?" I stared at my laptop screen, the test results still open, black ink glaring against white truth. I'd tell her to stop asking for love that hurts. That weekend, I logged into all the shared accounts, utilities, bank links, even a few subscriptions. I began quietly removing my name, not in revenge, in release. No messages, no announcements, just quiet exits. I didn't owe them an explanation for reclaiming my peace. Let them plan their perfect wedding. Let them toast to illusions. I had other things to prepare, and this time they wouldn't see me coming. I didn't plan to hear what I heard. I was dropping off a financial summary for Dad's accountant, something he still asked for out of habit more than gratitude. The office was quiet. The receptionist pointed me toward the conference room. "Just slip it under the door," she said. I did, but the door was slightly ajar, and I heard my name. "She won't contest anything." Linda's voice was sharp, certain. "Legally, it's clean. The will specifies Vanessa as the sole heir." I froze. George agreed, she continued. "It's not like Natalie needs the money. She has that apartment, her job." The papers trembled in my hand. "I just don't want drama during the wedding. It's Vanessa's moment. Natalie's always been complicated." Complicated. That word landed harder than any slap. I backed away, heart pounding. By the time I reached my car, I couldn't breathe. I sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering like it could anchor me. So it was true. Not only was I not enough, I was being erased on paper. They planned to disinherit me. Not in anger, not in punishment, but in indifference. The kind that says, "You're not even worth fighting." That night, I didn't sleep. The walls of my apartment felt too tight. I opened every drawer, pulled out bills, copies of wire transfers, old emails from Dad asking for help. And I cried. Not for the money, not even for the will. I cried for the 15-year-old who begged to go on a family trip and was told it wasn't her year. For the college freshman who sent postcards home that never got a reply. For the grown woman still waiting to be chosen. But the next morning, I didn't feel hollow. I felt sharp, clear. They had drawn the line. Now I would too. I didn't call them. I didn't storm into their house with printed records or screaming truths. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen, and I started listing every dollar I had given them since 2018. It came out to just over $541,200. I added a second column, gifts Vanessa received from them in the same time span. Car, rent, art studio lease, travel, jewelry, at least double that. But the number wasn't what hurt. It was the ease with which I had given, and the casualness with which they had erased. I made copies of every bank record, every forwarded invoice, labeled and time-stamped. Claire had once told me if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. Now it had happened. That weekend, I visited the family home. Linda was in the garden, pruning white roses, wearing gloves that matched her straw hat. She didn't look surprised to see me, just mildly inconvenienced. "Natalie," she said, brushing soil from her wrist. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" I didn't sit, didn't ask for tea, just handed her a folder. "What's this?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "Proof," I said, "of who I am, of what I've done." She didn't open it, didn't touch the papers, only tilted her head like she was examining a chipped plate. "This is about the will, isn't it?" Her tone was dry. "Sweetheart, not everything is personal." That broke something in me. "Of course it is," I said. "When you spend your life pretending someone doesn't count, don't be shocked when they finally do." Her eyes flicked just once, but she recovered fast. "You've always been dramatic." I smiled then, for the first time in months. "Maybe, but I've also always been right." And with that, I walked away not victorious, not vindicated, but no longer begging to belong. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. The same eyes I'd always had stared back at me, but they no longer looked for permission. They looked for proof. The kind of proof no test could offer. Not DNA, not wire transfers, not notarized documents. I brushed my hair slowly. The bathroom light flickered. Even my reflection felt tired of waiting to be seen. I pulled out the old photo box from my closet. The one labeled family, the one I hadn't opened in years. Vanessa in a princess dress, grinning. Me half smiling beside her, holding the train of her costume. Dad with his arm around Mom, both beaming at Vanessa's art display. I wasn't even in the frame. Another photo, Christmas, maybe 2003. Vanessa opening a bicycle. Me in the background holding the gift I had bought her. I closed the box gently. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about being left out anymore. It was about refusing to re-enter a house that had locked me out long ago. My value had been transactional to them, useful when needed, invisible when not. I could have screamed, could have demanded an apology, could have sent those documents to every extended family member on the list. But what would that do? It wouldn't change them. It wouldn't heal me. So instead, I booked a session with a therapist Clara had recommended, someone who specialized in family estrangement and financial abuse. The intake form asked, "What brings you here?" I wrote, "They erased me, but I'm still here." The session was quiet, but it felt like breathing for the first time. I didn't tell them I was in therapy. They wouldn't ask. They never did. A few days later, Vanessa sent a group text about the final wedding rehearsal. It ended with, "Please no drama. Let's make this about love." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed just 2 words, "It already is." I didn't hit send, not yet, but in that moment, I wasn't showing up for them anymore. I was showing up for myself. I didn't expect grief to feel like silence. Not the kind that follows death, but the kind that settles when you're still alive but forgotten. Therapy helped, but it couldn't undo the layers. You can name pain, you can even trace its roots, but naming it doesn't mean you can stop feeling it. The week of Vanessa's wedding loomed like a deadline I hadn't agreed to. At work, numbers blurred on spreadsheets, emails piled up unread. My coffee turned cold twice before lunch. I stared out my office window, watching people pass, laughing, holding hands, carrying groceries. Their lives looked intact. Mine felt like a drawer someone had emptied and slammed shut. I tried to journal the way Clara suggested, but each word bled onto the page. Why wasn't I enough? Why does it still hurt even after I know the truth? How do you grieve a family that's still alive? Evenings were the hardest. I'd come home to the quiet hum of my fridge, make tea, let it steep too long, forget it until it turned bitter. I stopped answering texts from friends, not because I didn't love them, but because I didn't want to lie. Even music betrayed me. Songs I used to hum felt foreign, like they belonged to someone who hadn't yet been erased. I looked around my apartment, framed certificates, bookshelves, a couch I chose for comfort, and I realized this space held me better than they ever had. Still, the ache lingered, heavy, like a coat I hadn't taken off in years. Mom hadn't asked how I was, Dad hadn't checked in, Vanessa hadn't texted once. It wasn't a fight, it was absence, and that hurt worse. I was expected to stay quiet, show up, smile, support her like a good sister. But I had stopped knowing what that meant a long time ago, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself ask out loud, what if I didn't go? I sat at the kitchen counter the next morning, coffee in hand, barely touched. The sun spilled through the blinds in sharp lines, dividing the room between light and shadow. Kind of like how I felt. Part of me still wanted their approval, still longed for a text from Mom that said, "We miss you. Please come," even just a thinking of you. But it never came. Instead, a group photo from the rehearsal dinner lit up my phone. Vanessa front and center, glowing, George at her side, his hand on her back. Linda radiant in a navy gown, holding a glass of wine. No empty chair, no mention of where I was. I zoomed in looking for something, a glance, a shadow, anything that said they remembered I existed. There was nothing. I had spent so many years trying to earn space in that frame. And there it was, cropped, filtered, sealed, without me. So I closed the photo and opened my banking app. I scrolled through months of transfers, each payment labeled with quiet obedience, Dad medical, Vanessa rent, Mom car repair. I had built their stability while mine frayed in silence, and they still called me difficult. Difficult for having boundaries, for asking questions, for remembering the things they hoped I'd forget. I took a breath, a long, shaky one, and I whispered aloud, "You're not going." The word surprised me, hung in the room like perfume after someone leaves. I wasn't saying it to punish them, I was saying it to protect myself, because showing up meant offering myself up again to be ignored, pitied, or worse, tolerated. And I was done being tolerated. The decision not to go didn't feel bold. It felt quiet, like finally closing a door I'd kept cracked open for too long, like removing my name from a group email, like hitting leave conversation and breathing easier afterward. I thought I'd feel guilty, that maybe I'd wake up the next morning and regret it, that the ache of being left out would demand I crawl back in. But it didn't. Instead, something shifted, subtle but certain, like air returning to a collapsed lung. I lit a candle that night, lavender, the same scent they'd once said gave them headaches, but I liked it, so I let it burn. I made dinner slowly, not out of obligation, but care. Chopped vegetables the way Clara taught me, with presence, not speed, not shame. I set the table for one, and for the first time in years, that didn't feel lonely. Outside, wedding photos were being taken, speeches rehearsed, glasses clinked. But inside my apartment, the silence was mine, not theirs. I pulled out an old journal from a drawer I rarely opened. Inside it, a letter I'd written at 22, to my future self. It said, "I hope you are loved, even if not loudly. I hope you stop proving yourself. I hope you feel chosen." I cried then, not because I was sad, but because I finally understood her. She wasn't desperate. She was just waiting for me to remember who I was. So I wrote a new entry. "Dear Natalie, you did not get the family you hoped for, but you became the woman you needed." The ink smeared a little, but the words stayed intact. Later that night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the balcony, watched the city below. There was no applause, no confetti, no dramatic music swelling. But there was peace, not the kind you beg for, the kind you build. The kind that comes when you finally stop asking people to choose you and choose yourself instead. The morning after the wedding, I opened my laptop. The newsfeed showed filtered photos, Vanessa twirling in lace, Linda dabbing her eyes, Dad raising a glass mid-toast. No caption mentioned a sister, no tag included my name. It didn't sting, not anymore, not like before. Instead, I clicked into my banking dashboard. Account, Whitmore financial status active. Linked parties, George Evans, Linda Evans. I hovered over the connection, then clicked remove access. A prompt popped up. "Are you sure?" I didn't blink, just pressed yes. One by one, I began the cleanup. Joint utilities, old automatic transfers, a storage unit Dad had put in my name just temporarily. Gone. I called the financial institution we all used, the one where my name still appeared as secondary guarantor on a bridge loan. The woman on the phone was helpful, firm. "Yes, you're eligible to request a release," she said. "We'll need your signature." Done, signed, scanned. I forwarded it to Clara with the subject line, "Unhooking the last anchors." Her reply came quickly, just 3 words. "Welcome to clean." By mid-afternoon, I felt lighter. Not healed, but untangled. I changed the password to my cloud drive, archived old family emails into a separate folder called Archive Not Mine. Even the photos, I didn't delete them, but I moved them into a hard drive, like you might do with evidence or ashes. I wasn't erasing history. I was refusing to carry it barehanded anymore. The phone rang twice that day. Both times I let it go to voicemail, one from Dad, one from a distant aunt who never called unless someone died or got married. No one said my name in the messages. Just call us back when you're ready. And Vanessa really missed you yesterday. I stared at the screen for a while, then flipped it over. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence they had built. Because for the first time it wasn't mine to fill. That evening I opened a bottle of red wine I'd been saving for a celebration. Not a birthday, not a promotion. Just a moment like this when peace finally outweighed permission. I poured one glass, let it breathe, took one long sip, then opened my second laptop, the one I rarely used. The one tied to my professional consulting account. Inside was a folder marked Evans Support, 2018 to present. Dozens of spreadsheets, budgets, emergency breakdowns, medical statements I'd paid outright. Each document proof, not of generosity, but of a daughter asked to fix what was never hers to break. I uploaded them to a private drive, encrypted, password protected, not for revenge, just so I'd never let anyone gaslight me again. I typed one line into the notes section. You were never just dramatic. You were their safety net. Then I shut the lid. No rage, no tears. Just silence clean and earned. Later, I logged into the shared Dropbox, where Vanessa had sent wedding planning files months ago. A note still sat inside. Natalie, can you help track expenses for the florist and DJ? I clicked Leave folder. That was it. No announcement, no drama. Just gone. It felt better than I expected. Like taking off shoes that never quite fit but you kept wearing out of habit. I pulled up my savings account, the one I hadn't touched since 2020. The balance was lower than it should have been. But it was mine, every cent. I transferred $2,000 into a new account, labeled it The Next Chapter. Not for revenge, not for survival, but for me. Because I had spent so long funding their comfort that I forgot what mine felt like, and I was ready to remember. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. No tightness in my chest, no mental rehearsals of fake smiles, just stillness. I made coffee, used the French press, not the machine, took my time. Then I sat at the dining table, pen, notebook, clean page. Not a to-do list, not a revenge plan, just one question at the top. If no one is coming to save you, what do you want to build? The answers didn't come all at once, but they came. A quiet home near water, a mentorship program for women in finance, work that wasn't tied to family guilt, days that started with choice, not obligation. I looked around. This apartment, once temporary, had become sacred. The windows I cleaned, the couch I'd cried on, the kitchen that had waited patiently while I gave everything away elsewhere. Not anymore. I lit another lavender candle, let it fill the space. I opened a new document, budget reclaim, labeled columns now, next, later. Now close old accounts. Next, cabin research therapy fund. Later, apply for nonprofit license. It didn't have to be fast. It just had to be mine. My phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. Just 2 words. And you coming? I stared at it for a full minute. No hi. No how are you. Just a question that assumed I'd keep playing the role. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked the number. Not out of spite, but for clarity. Then I did the same for the family group chat. I wasn't angry. I was finished. The door didn't slam. It didn't need to. It just stopped being mine to knock on. That afternoon, I went for a walk by the water. Puget Sound was calm, clouds low silver, thoughtful. I breathed in. For the first time, the future didn't feel empty. It felt possible, and I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I was building peace. But have you ever had to unhook from the people you once called family? Share your quiet turning point below. Your story matters more than you know. It started with a drive. A long one, no music. Just the sound of tires humming against the road and my breath steady even. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not Clara, not the office, certainly not my family. I just drove north. The city gave way to trees, sidewalks disappeared. Gas stations turned into barns and handmade signs for honey. When I saw the water, I knew. Puget Sound spread out in front of me, blue-gray and wide, like something that had witnessed everything and judged nothing. I pulled over at a small viewpoint, killed the engine, and sat there, hands in my lap, heart calm for the first time in weeks. It didn't feel like escape. It felt like a return to something that had waited for me to stop performing. There was a for sale sign just past the trees, half hidden, weathered. A gravel path led toward a narrow cabin painted pine green with smoke curling from a stone chimney. I wasn't looking for property, not yet, not officially, but my feet moved before my brain did. I followed the path, listened to the crunch beneath my boots, heard a bird I couldn't name, smelled pine wood smoke salt. The cabin wasn't big. One floor, a wraparound porch, a wooden bench out front with faded cushions. I peered into the window, bookshelves, a kettle on the stove, worn, beautiful solitude. I took out my phone, snapped one photo, then saved the listing number on the sign. Not because I was ready to buy, but because for the first time I saw a future where I didn't have to be near them to feel worthy. I didn't need marble countertops or inherited real estate. I needed stillness, a space no one else had claimed, a place where my story wasn't cropped out of the frame. And in that moment, I realized my plan wasn't to retaliate. It was to rebuild. Quietly, deliberately, brick by honest brick. When I got back to the city, I didn't unpack right away. I left my coat draped over the chair, my bag slouched by the door, and I stood in the middle of my living room, letting the silence settle back around me. But it wasn't the same silence. It didn't sting. It held me. The next day, I scheduled a call with Clara. I told her about the cabin, about the gravel path, about the first breath I'd taken in weeks that didn't hurt. She didn't ask if I was ready. She didn't tell me to be careful. She said, "Tell me what you want to do next. I'll listen." So I started mapping it out. First, I ran the numbers. Savings, debt, freelance contracts lined up for Q1. I could make it work, not comfortably, but honestly. I canceled a client whose demands were endless and late payments predictable, and I didn't apologize. Then I updated my website, quietly rebranding. No more family business specialties, no more wealth preservation for trust fund heirs. I wrote new copy, Financial Clarity for Women Who Start Over at 40. You don't need permission to take up space. Next, I posted a short piece on LinkedIn. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't name names. It simply said, "After years of managing other people's finances, I've learned the hardest money to track is emotional. Starting now, I'm building something that doesn't bleed." The comments were full of women saying, "Thank you. I needed this. My God, same." I created a separate email address, signed up for nonprofit workshops, downloaded legal templates. One document I titled, "The Whitmore Fund for Women Who Were Left Out." I didn't know what it would become, but I knew how it would feel, like justice, like legacy, like peace that no one else had the power to cancel. I also emailed the listing agent about the cabin, asked for details, square footage, winter access, septic tank, HOA dues. She replied the same day, said a few people were interested, but no one had followed up yet. I didn't rush. I asked for one private viewing, quiet, unlisted, no family. She agreed. Later that night, I made a playlist called Begin Again. Track 1, Silence. Track 2, Nora Jones. Track 3, My Own Breath. I lit the lavender candle again, let it burn down this time. Then I wrote an email to myself. Subject what you chose. Body you chose distance over approval. You chose clarity over performance. You chose yourself. I archived it, not because I wanted to forget, but because I knew I'd need to remember. There was power in that. Not rage, not victory, but power. The kind that doesn't knock. The kind that builds. The ballroom smelled like roses and resolution. White petals lined the aisle like fallen promises. Gold-trimmed plates shimmered beneath soft chandelier light. Laughter rippled at tables curated, effortless, rehearsed. And then I walked in. Not out of longing, not for drama, but because sometimes truth deserves a witness, even if it's just you. I wore navy, structured shoulders, clean lines, no shimmer, no apology. As I stepped inside, heads turned, eyes blinked in surprise. Aunt Marcy whispered something behind her hand. Cousin Jenny froze wine mid-sip. I didn't flinch, didn't search the room for approval. I knew they hadn't saved a seat. I walked past centerpieces dripping in orchids, past the harpist still plucking notes from the corner, toward the family table. Linda saw me first. Her face didn't change, but her fork stopped halfway to her mouth, still, rigid, precise. George turned slowly as if time itself had warned him. His eyes met mine, calculating. Vanessa looked up from her phone. Blink, pause, then the smirk. Well, she said, folding her napkin with too much ceremony. Look who finally decided to show. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a white envelope. Thick, sealed, deliberate. This, I said, placing it directly between her wine glass and her dessert spoon, is a copy of the trust, signed by Dad, filed in 2017. Linda's smile cracked. George leaned forward. I kept speaking soft, clear, steady. It names me as equal co-owner of Whitmore Holdings. It outlines the financial transfers I made since 2019. Every payment, every loan, every bailout you never spoke of. Someone at a nearby table turned their head. The harpist stopped playing. Vanessa scoffed. You really brought paperwork to my wedding? I tilted my head. No, I brought the truth. The paperwork's just quieter. George opened the envelope. His hands didn't tremble, but his throat moved when he swallowed. One line in, and his eyes lifted, finally seeing me. Not as a burden, not as a background, but as something he owed. I didn't need his voice to say it. The silence was enough. I stepped back, heels clicking against marble, past the Tower of Macarons, the cascading lights, the hundreds of people who still didn't know who I was. Each step was an ending, not a storm, a closure. And I walked out, not waiting for applause, but giving myself the only exit they never would, the one that belonged to me. I didn't check my phone for hours. Not after I left the ballroom, not as I drove past the edge of the city, not as I pulled into my apartment, unlocked the door, kicked off my heels, and let the silence wrap around me like a second skin. But I knew they'd be reaching out. Of course they would. Truth, even when delivered softly, lands hard. By the time I showered and poured myself tea, my inbox held 7 new emails, 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, and 1 group message from Linda titled, Clarification. I didn't open any of them. Not yet. I sat by the window legs tucked under me, watching the streetlights flicker on, one by one, the sky slowly bruising from indigo to black. And I waited, not for chaos, but for clarity. By morning, the real fallout had started. Aunt Cheryl forwarded me a screenshot of a text Linda sent to the cousins. Something about how Natalie misunderstood and timing was inappropriate, but the words were already crumbling. People asked questions. Too many receipts existed. Too many silences had become visible. Clara texted a simple, "You did it." I responded, "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped hiding it." Vanessa posted a filtered story the next day, her hands around a champagne flute captioned, "Family isn't always about blood. Some people just don't fit the table." I didn't reply, didn't screenshot, didn't flinch, because I knew now the table wasn't sacred. It was selected, and I was done chasing seats I had to earn with silence. George called once. I let it go to voicemail. His voice cracked when he spoke. Just 3 words. Can we talk? That was it. No explanation, no defense. Just the voice of a man whose story had finally met the end of its edits. I didn't erase the message, but I didn't respond either. Some truths echo longer in silence than they ever would in reply, and I was learning to let silence speak for me. That week, I didn't speak about the wedding, not to coworkers, not to neighbors, not even to Clara, until she asked. We met for coffee on Thursday. Corner table, rain misting the windows, my hands around a ceramic mug just to feel something solid. You look lighter, she said. I didn't answer right away, just watched a mother outside zip her child's coat, then let him run ahead into the gray morning. I didn't burn it down, I finally said. I just stopped holding it up. Clara nodded. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't ask for the gory details. Instead, she passed me a folder. Inside a contact. Legal consultant. Trusted discreet. Could help finalize separation of financial ties, especially from family-owned businesses. Next step, she said. I took the folder, not because I needed more proof, but because I was ready to close the loop, properly, completely. That night, I wrote George an email. Short, respectful, final. I'm formally requesting that my role in Whitmore Holdings be transferred in accordance with the original trust terms. Please direct all future communication through legal counsel. I didn't wait for his reply. I didn't refresh the page. I didn't check if he read it. The power wasn't in what came back. It was in what I chose to stop sending. On Friday, I ordered a print of the cabin photo, had it framed in dark wood, hung it near the front door. A reminder, not of escape, but of the moment I stopped knocking. Saturday afternoon, I walked past a boutique, saw a small dish in the window etched in gold script. And your silence is not absence. It's presence on your own terms. I bought it, placed it on my nightstand. Sunday, I got one last email from Vanessa, a single line. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. No archive, no screenshot, no proof needed. Because yes, I was. Not the confetti kind, not the movie ending, but the kind you earn in fragments, in every boundary, in every choice to stay gone. And when I woke the next day, the first thing I felt wasn't anger, wasn't grief, wasn't guilt. It was space, and the quiet certainty that I would never go back. The cabin wasn't perfect. The plumbing needed updating. The windows let in too much cold air. The porch steps creaked under my weight. But it was mine, not because I owned it outright, but because I chose it. Every inch, every scent, every silence. I moved in that spring, boxes labeled in clean handwriting, no family heirlooms, no wedding crystal, just books, notebooks, candles, a ceramic tea set I'd bought for myself during a layover in Denver. I brought nothing that carried their energy, no silver-framed memories, no linen napkins passed down, just softness I had chosen. I planted lavender by the back door, hung wind chimes from the awning, watched deer wander through the pines, and didn't reach for my phone. I let the mornings pass without narration. No posts, no updates, just breath. Peace didn't come like a wave. It came like rhythm, like coffee boiling slowly, like the sound of pine cones hitting the roof, like remembering your name after years of answering to someone else's version of you. I took client calls from a wooden desk by the window, created worksheets for women rebuilding after divorce debt, or both, led virtual sessions with names I would never forget. Melissa, Ava, Sandra, women who had also given too much, too long for too little. I called the project the Whitmore Collective. Not a brand, not a company, a place to begin again. I didn't post about the cabin, didn't write essays about reclaiming space, didn't perform healing. I lived it. And that was enough. On Sundays, I hiked trails behind the property, sometimes with Clara, sometimes alone. I brought a thermos of coffee, sat on a weathered bench that overlooked the sound. From there, the water looked endless, silver, patient, unmoved by what came before. That's how I wanted to be, not loud, not righteous, just whole. The pain didn't vanish. It came back in dreams, in unexpected moments, in scent memories, but it no longer dictated. It visited, and when it knocked, I met it at the door with quiet grace. "You don't live here anymore," I whispered once, watching steam rise from my cup. "You're just passing through." Legacy used to sound like marble and mahogany to me. Like family trusts, oil portraits and drafty stairwells, fictional values printed in embossed invitations, names passed down like borrowed power. But that was never mine. My legacy wouldn't come in inheritance letters or holiday speeches. It would live in other places, smaller, quieter ones, in spreadsheets that taught women how to breathe around numbers, in calls where I told them, "You're not broken, just buried." It lived in the way Melissa stopped apologizing for asking questions, in how Ava rewrote her monthly budget with pride instead of shame, in the silence after Sandra said, "He took everything, but I still have me." I began offering community workshops, small libraries, church basements, even Zoom rooms at night. No frills, no fees for those who couldn't pay. Some weeks, just 3 women showed up, sometimes 12, once just 1. But we kept going. We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about clarity and options, and how walking away can be the bravest form of staying whole. One woman cried during a session, said she hadn't said her own name out loud in years without adding his wife or their mom. I told her, "Your name is enough." And in that moment, the room shifted. Not because of me, but because she heard herself. That became my new measure of impact, not applause, not testimonials, but when a woman heard her voice and didn't flinch. Sometimes after class, I'd sit on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. Clara would join me. We didn't say much, just shared silence like a language we'd earned. I once asked her, "What do you think they'll say about us one day?" She smiled. Hopefully nothing. Hopefully they'll just keep going because we did. And that was enough. That was legacy, not memory, but motion. One morning, almost a year later, I received a letter forwarded from my old apartment. It was handwritten, thick cream paper, no return address. Inside were just a few lines, wobbly, unsure, but real. "I saw what you did. I don't have your courage yet, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. Thank you for going first." There was no name, no signature, just the quiet weight of recognition. I sat on the floor back against the wall letter, resting on my knees, not crying, not smiling. Just letting it land. Not everyone needs to be seen by a crowd. Some of us just need to be felt by one. And that too can be legacy. That spring, I finally changed my last name. Not to spite anyone, not to pretend, but to declare myself my own. It felt strange at first, foreign on my tongue, like trying on a coat not yet broken in. But then something settled. Not comfort, but recognition. I wasn't erasing who I had been. I was finally naming who I had become. The first time I introduced myself at a workshop, I paused, stumbled, then laughed. A woman in the back smiled and whispered, "Me too." Vanessa never reached out again. Linda sent one short email about tax forms. George sent a donation to the nonprofit anonymously. And that was that. No apology, no phone call, no rewrite. Only forward motion. Sometimes healing isn't about forgiveness. It's about release. It's about learning you don't need the past to agree with your version of the truth. Now when someone asks what I do, I don't start with my credentials. I don't list the years I spent proving myself. I say I help women start over. With numbers, with words, with silence they can finally trust. And I mean every word, because healing doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes like a chair pulled out just for you, like a name you no longer have to justify, like a day that ends in quiet without needing to explain why. And if you're reading this wondering if it's too late, if you've missed your chance, if the life you imagined was a detour too far gone, here's your answer. As you didn't lose it, you were always on your way back, and now you've arrived.
Wow.
Have you ever built something powerful after walking away from what broke you? Share your moment below, someone else might need it more than you know. Subscribe to Reddit Story for real stories about justice, closure, and empowerment after 40.